Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune into our live stream webinar. And we're going to talk about winning workplace environments. And I am so pleased to have a featured guest speaker, one of our community partners and clients, Mr. Cornelius Eason.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Cornelius, for joining us today.
You betcha.
And as a matter of fact, I'd like to share a couple things about your experience within the industry
Okay.
of HR.
Absolutely.
Well, first of all, Cornelius, he is the owner of HR Partners, and he's also has a plethora of experience in being an entrepreneur, and also you've served in the capacity on a number of boards and advisory committees, and it's a very impressive portfolio on how you provide your expertise in those different types of organizations and their development.
Part of being a small business person.
I agree. You have to diversify. So with that, I'll share with you a little bit about HR Partners. So in today's workplace, it has become increasingly more efficient. So in that, HR issues are even more complex. They require time-consuming research, and also it causes many small to mid-sized businesses to consult expensive employment attorneys regarding issues that could be handled by a much less expensive HR professional. And this is where someone like you and your firm of professionals come into play.
Absolutely.
So HR business partners, they have that solution for you. And they have seasoned professionals that can address most non-legal HR issues. And today we're going to talk about one in particular. And so with that, would you like to share with the audience your the background about HR Partners and your company, and some more information about that?
I will. I have been in the employment and HR space for almost 20 years now, and all of that experience has been here in Southern Nevada. I started out in the temporary staffing and employment business. I formed a company called Priority Staffing USA in 1998, and we grew from scratch. There were literally three of us that started the business on January 6, 1998. I remember that date.
Wow, that's amazing.
There were three of us. I was the salesperson, I had a receptionist, and we had a recruiter. And we knew absolutely no one in town. We had no clients, but I was out knocking on doors. And luckily, it was in the winter when it wasn't so hot like it is today. But we went out and we built a client base, and we became over the first our original business plan was to be profitable in 3 years. We became profitable in about 18 months or so.
Oh, excellent.
And we just happened to be in the right place at the right time. To back up just a bit, I moved here from Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay.
And the reason I selected Las Vegas was it was the kind of the epicenter of business activity in the country. So the strip dynamic was changing. So a lot of the new properties were coming online, the Bellagio, the Venetian, Mandalay Bay, Paris, and all of those properties were coming online. But at the same time, it was probably the fastest growing community in the country in terms of influx of population.
Sure.
So we were at the right place at the right time. We had employers that were hiring people, and we had employees that were looking for jobs. So we happened to land in the right place, and thus we were fortunate enough to grow. So after about 3 or 5 years or so, we became one of the leading staffing firms here in Southern Nevada.
Excellent.
And we competed against a lot of the main household name brands in that industry that you might think of. And so we were fortunate. Like I said, we hustled and we were at the right place at the right time. So fast forward, I decided to sell my portion of the business in 2009. So I exited temporary staffing and became a full-time consultant. And at that point, I was kind of a general business consultant. And so I did that for a number of years and decided about 3 years ago to simply focus on HR, which had been my primary occupation anyway. And so I changed the business structure, changed the business model, and renamed the business to HR Business Partner and focused exclusively on human resources. And our target market is small business, and I define small business as companies with, or agencies with fewer than 100 employees.
Okay.
Although we do projects for larger companies, our target market or our sweet spot is companies with fewer than 100 employees. And in fact, our sweet spot is companies with less than 50 employees. When you get between, depending on the industry, 50 and 100 employees,
Right.
you might be able to have in-house human resource department, but some choose to outsource it. So that's our market too. So that's how I got here. It's a little bit of background. We love HR. We're people. All of
I
our
like
staff
that.
are.
People. I like that.
And you know, we've grown and developed and helped grow and develop small business as the HR field evolves. It's not simply a compliance, and we'll talk about this a bit more, but it's not simply the compliance, the hiring, the paperwork part of the business.
Right.
It is really integrated into senior management and leadership of most companies these days.
I agree.
Because the people are your organization. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a bit more. So that's how I got here. That's my background.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing that and giving our audience your portfolio of experience so that they know that when, you know, I do make it a point that whenever I do have a featured guest speaker to talk about a particular topic, that this person is an expert in that field, this person is seasoned within that field and have an excellent resume to then share that knowledge and experience with our viewers and people that need guidance, so to speak, about enhancing their business infrastructure from an HR perspective. So, you know, with that, it seems to me that no matter where you go or what sector of business that you're in, company culture is always key or a common thread to enhancing or establishing or cultivating a winning workplace environment. So with that, how does company culture really influence the workplace?
Well, I think first and foremost, company culture is a reflection of the owners, the entrepreneur that started the business, or the leadership team that is managing a business. It truly is a reflection, whether it's conscious or unconscious, of their personality and the image that they would like to reflect depending on their industry, the product or services they offer, and that. So that's kind of the bottom line. So if you look at the owner and you look out in their environment, they're going to be mirrored to each other. You can't manufacture that. You can try to, and you can start off that way, but it's going to migrate back to the personalities of the leadership or the ownership of the company. So that's the first. And then second is when the leadership or the owners think about how they would like to be perceived in the marketplace, that mirrors the environment and the culture of the companies as well. So it mirrors itself in, number one, how do you present your products, what your distribution channels are, and all of those things. And then more specifically as it relates to human resources, the types of people that you hire. What are their personalities? Are they creative types? Are they people that like to operate in an environment that is where there's a lot of communications and where things are flexible and evolving? Or are you a button-down organization and there is a place and there are industries for that where things are run by process and procedure and there's not much variation on that and things don't change. Example that I had a friend that worked for the power company. And the power company is the kind of organization that you don't want a lot of creativity, you don't want a lot of flexibility. You want your lights to come on tomorrow. You don't want to think if maybe. So you want process and procedure and you don't want change to happen quickly in that kind of environment. And there are a number of environments like that. The legal field is one, medical field is another. So there is a place for structure and procedure, but there's also environments where you want creativity and flexibility and you want to meet the demands of the marketplace. So that culture, number one, is shaped by the owner, and the second thing is shaped by the industry, the products and services that you offer. So it's hugely important in terms of the success of a business.
Okay, well, looking at it from an employee's perspective, what if the culture that the owner has created is affecting the morale, performance, or productivity of the staff? Then what would be your suggestions in addressing that?
My experience has been when morale is low, there's a few things happening there. Number one, and you'll hear this over and over about a number of topics, is communications.
Sure.
And so there's a lack of communication somewhere. Either it's among peers or it's leadership to the general population of the employees. So one way or the other, there's a breakdown in communications. Either the employees don't understand what the goals of the organization are. They may not understand the values. They may not understand where they fit into the organization. They may not understand the complete attitudes of the owners or leadership. And then you have a lack of presence of ownership and leadership in the environment, and some people call it management by walking around. Are you visible? And if you're visible, are you accessible? Do you have an open door policy? Does an employee feel as though that they can come in and communicate with you and share with you just their thoughts and feelings? They may not have changes to the way things are done. They just might want to tell you, about their family, or they might want to feel that you're interested in them as not only a professional and an employee doing a job, but as a person, and that kind of thing. So when those things are lacking, then you're going to have poor morale. And so how do you improve that? It's you doing just the opposite. You communicate more. You tell the employees, what are we trying to accomplish? Are we accomplishing those? And if not, what do we do to get back on track? And if we are accomplishing success, how do we share that with employees? And it doesn't have to be monetary all the time. It could be, you could hold events. You could say, listen, we're going to have some flexibility and time off. There's creative ways to share success with the employees that don't have to always be monetary in value.
Okay. And so, given that you specialize in companies that have less than 100 employees, or maybe even less than 50 employees, and with our clients, they are starting up at that level, what are some common challenges do you find in companies of that size when it comes to creating the culture of the company, or motivating staff, and a small staff where typically everyone knows everyone's business. You can feel tension immediately in a company of that scope or scale versus a company that has 500 employees. So what are some common challenges or issues do you find in companies at that scale?
Well, that's an interesting one. And that's where we come in a lot of times. In general, in startups, the kind of organizations that are your clients, you have an entrepreneur who is an expert in something. They're really good at providing some service, or they've created a product and they're really good at developing that product and marketing that product and taking it to the marketplace. So they're very hands-on, they're very intimate with their business one way or the other. And so they've grown the business, and in general, most entrepreneurs kind of do everything for some period of time, because you just don't, unless you have huge capital backing in the beginning, but in general, most entrepreneurs don't. So they do as much as they can themselves. And so they do, in our case, they do what they consider HR, and that generally turns out to be hiring and firing. It's not the other compliance or cultural things that they do. And so once again, that's why the company culture takes on the personality, because the owner, the leadership are so involved, and it has to mirror their values, their work ethic, and all of those kinds of things. So as they evolve, and they get to be about, depending on the industry, they get to be about 20 or 25 employees. It gets beyond their reach. So in the beginning, what generally happens is that entrepreneurs hire not only family and friends, but close acquaintances, other experts in that particular area that they have a relationship and that they know and they're comfortable with. So they're surrounded by a circle of people that they have personal relationships. When they get to be about 20 or 25, and you start to need people that have specific skill sets. It might be in accounting, it might be a specific technical kind of skill, it might be salespeople. But when you need those specific skill sets, and you get beyond your scope of influence, the people you know. So now you're hiring people that you don't have a personal relationship, and they don't have a personal relationship with you.
Right.
And they may come from other environments where there's a bit more structure, or the culture is different, and so they start to ask for things. And so in our case, in HR, they ask for things like, I'd like a formal job description.
Oh,
And
yes,
so
yes,
the
yes.
response from the owner or the leadership is, well, I told you what it was going to be in the interview. And the
Yes.
person goes, yes, you did. You absolutely described it. But I'd like to see something in writing.
Right.
And so that may or may not be a flag, but it starts to get the owner's attention that, one or two things. Either I've got a problem here, somebody that's they're really asking me, what don't I do?
Right.
Or they could start to take it in a constructive manner and say, you know what, I need to start to formalize things, because we're not, we're not a small, teeny startup mom and pop anymore. We need to start. And so the job description leads to an employee handbook. So somebody might ask about a policy. And so, one of the common ones is that we have a casual day on Friday, or we have a casual work dress code for our work environment. And so somebody says, well, what does that actually mean? Does that mean that I can wear a tank top, or I can wear flip-flops, or I can wear those kinds of things? And the owner says, well, no, you can't wear flip-flops, you can't wear tank tops, you can't show too much skin, you can't wear baseball caps and that kind of thing. And so somebody will say, once again, it's outside of their circle of friends and acquaintances and that kind of thing. They say, well, where is that in writing? What's our employee handbook?
Yes.
And they go, well, I don't really have an employee handbook.
Right.
Didn't you get that email that I sent you out that said, and it's evolving? Well, I'd like to see something a little more formal. And so once again, the owner takes it one or two ways. They can take it constructively and say, well, okay, now some things have to be formalized. Or they can take it and say, well, this is a troublemaker here, and they're trying to, bring some values from somewhere else. And so that's where we come in. And so we start to coach the owner. And entrepreneurs are stubborn people, because if they've been successful, they say, I know how to do this. I've been doing this. We're winning, and we're achieving our goals in that. So don't come in and tell me how to do things.
Exactly.
And so it's a dance for us there. It's not. We're not trying to change the way you do things. We're just trying to help you formalize things to avoid situations as you grow and expand. And once again, as you hire people that don't have a personal connection to you, and that may be more comfortable with things that are formalized and are in writing, where there's a set policy and procedure. And so that's kind of where we come in. And the natural tendency for a lot of entrepreneurs is to say, okay, I need this, I need a job description, I need an employee handbook, I need a written process for this, I need procedures for this, and they go, how do I get this done? And so they convert some administrative person to the HR person.
That doesn't have that specific skill set.
And so they go out and they Google and they cut and paste and they pull something together in that, and then that creates a whole nother can of worms, because that's so generic that if it's challenged for some reason, so you have an incident, someone has an accident, or someone decides to take advantage of FMLA policies, and we can talk about that later if you'd like.
Sure.
You don't really have someone that's an expert in that, then the escalation from there is to your employment attorney, which is going to cost you $300 or $400 an hour, and nothing takes an hour with an attorney.
No.
And so you spend way too much. And so that's where we come in. That's where our services help small business owners. But it's that evolution, and it's not just us. There's a lot of people that can help them in that evolution of their business to start to formalize things and put processes and procedures that not only protect the business, but make the employees feel more comfortable, make them feel as though they're in a more professional environment. Although you can keep the creativity and the flexibility and all those things, but there are certain things that have to be, memorialized and documented.
Absolutely. You touched upon so many key areas that an entrepreneur, whether they're a startup and they're growing and developing, they will encounter. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the potential of the liability issue. It seems that when you're an entrepreneur and you're doing things on a day-to-day basis and you're really entrenched into the operations of your business, that sometimes working on your business, such as enhancing the systems and processes, sometimes that may take a back seat to the daily grind of the operations side of things.
Sure.
And HR is on the systems and processes, and there are times when either that isn't the little details isn't taken into consideration, or you create a generic product as a band-aid approach, so to speak, in creating a legitimate employee handbook, or processes and procedures and so on and so forth to help you cover yourself in case there is a liability issue. So with that, what if you you come across the whole dynamic of the owner and the owner and the employees, they have come to some kind of agreement that, okay, some things has to change within this culture in order for us to go from mom and pop to the growth phase that we are experiencing. So what does that entail? Does that entail training? Does that entail one-on-one meetings? Does that entail bringing in a consultant, such as your firm? And what types of topics, or what things would you discuss during those one-on-one consultation agreements? So I'm trying to drill down a little bit more in detail about that. What does that change entail?
I don't think there's a formula. It happens in all different kinds of ways.
Right.
One of the more dramatic ways that it happens is that your customers and your clients force you into that position. And so success can force you to standardize things and create processes and procedures. And so as you become more successful and demands of your business, as you interact with your clients, it's no longer do they want an invoice that's generated through an Excel spreadsheet, or they may ask you for a report, so it's December and they're closing out their books and they want a yearly summary of what have you sold to them at what price, and then you go, oh, now I got to go back and manually put together these Excel spreadsheets, right? And that's one client.
Yes.
And you've got 50 clients and you go, so this is going to take forever. And so now you say, I need a formalized accounting system to be able to do that.
Yes.
Okay, so now we've got 30 employees, and I used to just handwrite, their payroll check, and I did the taxes and deductions myself, and I filed my federal taxes, by hand, because there were only 5 or 6 of us. But now there's 25 of us, and I can't do that anymore. And of course, signing checks and that whole process, I can't delegate that to one of the lower level staff members.
Right.
So now maybe I need a bookkeeper, or I need at least a formalized payroll system and that kind of thing. So success can cause you to decide what you're going to do. It also forces you to decide, do we have the right skill sets? Okay, so now in the beginning, I was the jack of all trades, and I hired jacks of all trades, people that could wear multiple hats. And now I need people that are a little more specialized and have training in a given skill set. That generally starts in accounting. I lived the entrepreneur life. All these things, most of these things I've done. The one thing that I would never touch is the accounting. I never tried to do the accounting. When I got beyond the Excel spreadsheet, I had to get a bookkeeper or an outside accounting firm, and eventually we brought it in-house. But everything else, I tried to do it myself until my clients forced me, you got to be more professional here. I don't want a report that every time I do it, it's an ad hoc report. We'd like some standardized report. We'd like to be able to call you up and say, what did you sell us over this period of time? Especially if you're dealing with corporate clients.
Right.
They will force you to do those kinds of things. Your suppliers will do the same thing. Your suppliers that you buy whatever your product is to resell, they'll force you in to standardize, the way that you pay them, and the frequency you pay them. And it's no longer writing out, a check out of the petty cash account. It's now we'd like a formal bank transfer.
Yes.
And so we've got to sit down and think about, you said, how do we do this through training or meetings?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it would be nice to have that all planned out and everything, but no, I got a letter from one of my major suppliers here, and they'd like to have bank transfers now. They don't want to accept checks because that process is too long.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get in a meeting on Friday afternoon, you go, how do we do this?
Yes.
And you call up your banker and say, how does my banker, one of your partners,
Mm-hmm.
and they say, this is how we do that. And so it's an evolution thing. So it happens from a lot of different ways. It could be your clients. It could be one of your employees that force
Mm-hmm.
you to formalize things. It could be your supplier. So it happens in a number of ways. And generally it's not planned. And generally it's a good thing, because that means that you're growing, you're expanding,
Mm-hmm.
and it's forcing you to do things in a little more structured way for the marketplace.
Now, what I find this really fascinating, because people have I shouldn't say all people, but some people have the misconception that HR is just about interviews, hiring people, firing people, doing a little paperwork, and and that's about it. But it really is a core component, within your business. One of the systems that really does need a priority.
Absolutely.
And also skill development. So if you are a business owner, how can you, and you're still at that startup phase, and you have the vision of growing. So what are some suggestions that you would make for someone at that level to enhance their skill set when it comes to HR for their company?
And there will always be a compliance and administrative portion to HR, so that's a given. There's always the paperwork, as you said, but more and more HR is evolving to being more a part of strategic management, and so as leadership is developing the plans for the business for either growth or taking on new product lines or those kinds of things, they discover that they need certain skill sets, or that the existing staff need certain training and development. And so in the past, what would happen is you'd have leadership, and whether that was 2 or 3 people, the CEO, the CFO, and what have you, they would decide what they needed, and then they'd take it to HR and say, you know what, we need this kind of salesperson, or we think we need this kind of operations manager, we need this kind of operation manager, and this is kind of the job description, can you expand on it, and then go find that person. And so they bring back the person that was kind of the generic fit. They didn't really bake into that job description the culture of the company, the values of the company, what the temperament of the employee was going to be, in relation to the person they were going to be working for, or the team that they would be a part of. And so what's happened over time is they've discovered that we found a person very competent, they've got all the credentials and everything, but they just don't fit.
Exactly.
And so they weren't successful. So what's happened is they've moved to HR person, or the responsibilities of HR people, HR professional, into the responsibilities of some other person if they're not big enough to have an HR VP, so that they're at the table when you're deciding these kinds of things. So we're going to expand our market, right? So we sell product X, Y, Z, and so we're going to expand into product line ABC. We need someone that's able to develop that market for us, a salesperson and their team and that kind of thing. And so the HR person is there at the table when those decisions are being made, and they say, got it, we get it, we know the culture of our company, we know what you're trying to accomplish, we know the personality, we know the skill sets, we know who's going to fit in here, that kind of thing. So we're going to bake that in as we go out and look for that talent. And so we're seeing more strategic like that. And you mentioned, we talked about earlier about the culture of the company. Same thing. We're at the table, and the leadership, who used to be able to have conversations every day with everyone, now I've got 75 people. I can't get to everyone. But what I've noticed is I don't see as many smiles as I used to. I don't see as many lights on in the cubes at 6 a.m. or 7 p.m. And so people aren't really, things aren't bad, but I can just kind of sense something changing. And so the HR person is at the table and saying, you know what, I think we need to do some things to enhance our culture here. I'm hearing from leadership that you can feel this coming. So I'm going to make some suggestions. It doesn't have to be a big investment in terms of cash, but there could be some little things that we do.
Right.
You could have our CEO have brown bag lunches with just the staff and
Yes.
talk about what's going on. Tell me what's going on in the marketplace. That's how I'm going to learn. What are your customers telling you day to day? What are your suppliers telling you? That kind of thing. And so having HR at the table and having that conversation versus having people that aren't relating so much to the general employee or general staff
Right.
makes a huge difference in companies. And you're seeing that more and more from every level of company, from very small, mid-sized businesses to huge corporations.
Yes.
HR is at the table at leadership and at a strategic level.
So, so in reference to getting a person's like game plan together, if you were a startup entrepreneur or someone who is an established business owner, what are some elements that would be part of a strategic plan from an HR perspective to create that winning workplace environment? Just like generally
Boy.
speaking, because I know strategic plans can be very detailed, very thought-provoking, but just kind of like some basic elements that should be within that strategic plan to consider or to implement if you're thinking about creating a winning culture from day one, and within the evolution of the company over time.
Well, certainly you want people that are competent and that have the skill sets in whatever industry or whatever product or service you sell. So that's kind of the baseline. They know the business. Then you want a personality that's going to complement your personality,
Right.
and someone that may challenge you in a way that's constructive, right? So you don't want a person that's just going to simply follow your direction,
Right.
verse and just by the letter. You want somebody that might give you some feedback that you need, because you can't be everywhere at all time in
Right.
there. So you want that. You want somebody that's flexible, because in the beginning, we're all jacks of all trade. We wear multiple hats. So if I happen to ask you one day, you know what, I've got to get this order to a client, and I know that you've got things going on, but can you drive this over there? Or can you take this phone call while I'm doing this? Can you make the coffee tomorrow morning?
Sure.
And so you want somebody that's flexible, and then you want somebody that, as you've worked with them, they get the vision. So
Right.
where we're trying to go, it's beyond next week and next month
Right.
and next year. This is the big picture. And if they don't, you keep explaining it to them and saying, this is where we're going. We got to do these things to get there, but this is where we're going. So I think as you build your team, that's what. And then as your team expands, now you start to get people that are a bit more specialized.
Okay.
So sales is sales. Support is support, technical is technical, accounting is this, and accounting is that. And so
Right.
they still may wear multiple hats from time to time, but they're becoming more and more specialized as you expand.
This is fantastic. I mean, I can just sitting across from you, Cornelius, and just seeing and feeling your enthusiasm, and I can just tell immediately that this really is from a well of experience of, I've been there, I've done that, and you're just sharing all of this, knowledge and experience with us and our audience, and I really do appreciate those pearls of wisdom. So, in reference to the strategic plan, not only do you want someone that has buy-in into how the company is going to grow, but also buy-in how they are going to contribute as well
Absolutely.
to that growth.
Absolutely.
So could you expound upon that? How do you create an employee having a stake in it, having ownership, towards the mission of an organization to create that winning environment in a workplace?
Mm-hmm. Well, that can be done in a lot of different ways. From my personal experience, one of the things that, and I probably stole this idea from someone, but when we got to be a certain size, we couldn't all have lunch together anymore. Just schedules, and there were too many of us. So, but from on a regular basis, generally monthly, we'd have all hands on deck. So we bring everybody around, and it's just what's on your mind. I'll tell you what we're doing, but this isn't going to be a lecture top down. I'll kind of tell you what the news of the day is, if there's some significant event that's happening in the company. But I want to know what's going on with you, Alicia. What's going on with you, Tommy? What's happening in your world, right? Okay, so I saw you. I drove up the other week, Alicia, and it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you were leaving. Where were you going? Did your son have something going on? Did you have a baseball game? Did you have a doctor's appointment? You obviously earned it because your supervisor approved it, but I want to know what's going on in your life. Why did you go there? Tommy, I saw you the other day. You were on the phone and you were just cracking up, and I assume you were talking to a customer because that's what you're supposed to be doing. And so, what good was happening there? Tell me why you were so happy about that's going on. And so you get around, and so eventually they will tell you their ideas. And so as they start to see their ideas manifest themselves, and maybe it's not a strategic plan, but maybe it's some small change that happened.
Yes.
They told me about that the lights weren't on in the parking lot when I got here at 6 a.m. And so I didn't take that down as an action item. It just happened because I heard you. Right, I heard that from time to time the restroom's out of paper towels, and I didn't take that as an action item. It just happened. I did that. The packaging on our latest product, it wasn't the quality we're used to because we're using a different supplier, and so that might be something I announce after we've thought it through and negotiated with someone. But I say, you know what? As a result of Alicia telling us that our packaging wasn't holding up, and when we boxed things up, we got some rips and tears. We took our suggestion and we changed suppliers and we beefed that up. And so when you get that, and then the people will go, there wasn't a formal necessarily, like I said, action item or somebody sent a memo around, but they recognize, they really are listening. And I saw that change happen. It didn't happen the next day, but it happened over time. And so they feel valued, and they feel like you've got buy-in from leadership, and they're responding to their concerns. Is that going to happen? Is it going to happen in every instance? No, but the significant ones, that person feels it. You may not feel it, everybody else, but that person feels it. And if you do that enough, you create that culture of two-way communication. And that will just boil up to a strategic plan. So you don't have to go out and take a survey.
Right.
If you're communicating all the time, you already know the major things that you need to get done in conjunction with your overall mission and goals, what you're trying. So you have these financial missions. So we're trying to get to $17 million in revenue this year, and we want to hit the bottom line, 11.5%. So got that. So all the things flow from there, top down financially, and the investments we have to make in infrastructure and equipment and training and that kind of thing. But what flows up is the ideas about how do you get there? Can we afford that? Right? So can we afford to do the training that we need to do? Can we hire the extra 2 people because I'm overworked a bit, right? Because I told you, listen, I'm missing out on my life because I'm here till 8:30. Okay, I hear you. So we have to have somebody take a look at our budget, take a look at the span of responsibilities you have. Yeah, we can hire another person there because it's going to make your life easier. You're going to be more productive. You're going to have less time off and all those things. So a strategic plan doesn't have to just come from this formal top-down only.
Right.
It comes bottom-up at the same time.
Yes.
And once again, you don't have to take a survey if you're communicating regularly because you know the things. And if the employees feel free enough to express themselves and either their concerns or their ideas, they're creative people, you unleash their creativity and their skills and experience, then you'll get good feedback. And you can't implement every idea, but I'm sure there are some that you can. So,
absolutely,
that's been my experience.
Yeah, and we really do appreciate your experience. And I'm just curious, how does this come into play? Leadership, staff, buy-in. How does that impact the staff evaluation time? Because that can be a time for an employee where either you dread it, your annual performance evaluation, or you look forward to it and say, you know what, I've done some really good things. I'm sure there's some things I can improve upon. I'm ready, for this conversation. So how does all of that tie into creating a winning environment? How does that impact the performance evaluation of personnel?
Performance evaluations don't have to be that complex, and they don't have to be dreaded. An annual evaluation is really not an annual evaluation. It's accumulation of evaluations that happen throughout the year. So there should be no surprise at the end of the year. You know what's going on there.
And you're talking to people too, and that communication as well.
Exactly. I've done my share of terminations. I've done my share of promotions and acknowledgments and rewards for people that have done well. But it's never a surprise. It's always, you know what's going on with you. So whether or not we have a monthly review of where you are in terms of performance, or we have a weekly, or I'm telling you, you know, day to day that you need to improve on this, and this is how this is going to, if it gets to the point where we need an action plan. So this is our action plan. We'll give some training. We're going to have you shadow with someone that's a bit more experienced and successful. We're going to put together a plan to see if you improved. And then we're going to revisit this. I'm going to give you a schedule, right? So this, once again, you're not wondering when this is going to happen. This is going to be a 30-day schedule. And at the end of 30 days, we're going to see how your performance has changed. And if it's improved, then we did the right thing. If it isn't improved, we may try something else, or I may find out what's going on with you. And then there may be some times where you go, you're just not going to be successful in this position for whatever it is, and so we're going to have to make some changes. And changes sometimes or move you to another position if we have that opportunity, if we feel you could be successful there. And sometimes you have to separate. Maybe you're in the wrong place. And as a business owner, you have to make that decision. I mean, you'd love to have everybody come along on your journey, but everybody can't go along on your journey. And so you have to separate that, and you make that transition, you know, as professionally as possible with as much empathy as you can. But at the end of the day, sometimes you have to make decisions that are business decisions and aren't pleasant. And so you do it as, once again, as professionally as possible. You don't shy away from it, and you have it happen the minute you determine that it's got to happen. You don't drag it on. And that just makes everybody, you know, uncomfortable when you have that kind of situation. And so performance evaluations, for me, there should be no surprises. You know, we get to a yearly, if we do a yearly review, you should pretty much know that you've been successful, and so you're going to be rewarded for that. And you need to be rewarded, or that you haven't been successful, and we're going to have to do something to correct that.
I agree. How do you, what are your thoughts in having it known from a leadership perspective, you know, to their teammates and fellow colleagues within the organization that, you know, we are trying to create a winning culture here, you know, to have you develop professionally, and we want you to be on for the ride for the long term. How do you establish that and keep that momentum going over time? Because initially, when a person comes on, you know, as a new person in a company, they're very enthusiastic, you know, bushy, you know, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, so to speak. And then after a while, they start noticing the office politics, the culture, and that may affect their, you know, their perspective, you know, compared to when they initially, you know, came in with full of enthusiasm and excitement. So when reality sets in, and then they say, oh, okay, this isn't what I exactly thought this place was about. This isn't what was conveyed to me in the interview. So how do you take that person that is at that point now and kind of like redirect them or remotivate them or rejuvenate them to be excited, to be on board, you know, for the long haul, if that makes any sense?
No, it doesn't. Oh boy, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot going on there, from the sourcing process. How do you source candidates, right? How do you evaluate talent? How do you recruit them? How do you bring them on board? What is the onboarding process, and how extensive is the onboarding process? For some companies, onboarding is, okay, I gave you a day or two orientation on the background of the company, what we do, and then I have you shadow someone. And so that is the least successful way to do onboarding, in my opinion. So there's other things. So you didn't want to get too much into onboarding. So one of the things in terms of culture and keeping people motivated and keeping that enthusiasm is if you have to, in the culture, a couple things. You've got to eliminate as much as possible, almost all of it, negativity. So there is no room for negative comments. If you've got something that you want to contribute to the business that's constructive, or you're having a personal issue with someone, then let somebody know and see if we can't work out that personal issue. But we don't want to have this gossip, a culture of gossip. You've got to nip that in the bud right away. You know, and then you've got to eliminate those negative comments. And it can never come from leadership, because people are mirroring leadership. And so if one manager is talking about another manager, whether they're talking to, you know, line employees, or they get overheard in the break room, or you know, somebody posted something on Facebook or Twitter or what have you, you can't have that at all. And so that starts top down, the example of not having the negativity. In terms of the culture of success and how people are rewarded or they're penalized for not success, you know, people know. You know, people know who the hard workers are. People know among their peers who's doing a good job and who's being acknowledged. So if you're out doing the job the way it's supposed to be, and you go above and beyond, and I see that you're rewarded, well, that's my model. Nobody has to tell me. I just need to model after what you've done. And you get in here and you put in a little extra time. You get your time off, but you put in a little extra time. You took the time to go out and do some self-development. So you took a course on Corsico or Khan Academy or one of those, and you learned something. I'm sitting with you and say, how'd you know how to do that? Well, I took the initiative to go out and I bought an audio book, or I went and I took a course, and now I know how to do that. And guess what? Either I got a promotion, or I got a raise, or I got acknowledged in a staff meeting, or the all hands and that kind of thing. By the same token, as I just saw you come out of the manager's office, and I did notice that you're kind of slacking off a little bit. Something's going on. So I hope you worked that out if you were having some personal problems or you needed some training and development, that kind of thing. So the floor knows. I'll call it the floor. The production floor knows what's going on. And so as long as you maintain a positive culture, you eliminate the negativity, the gossip, then they'll know what's going on. The peers will know who's being rewarded and who's being developed, right? Because it's not all to be punitive, and it's not all penalizing someone. It's just recognizing that they need some development. So, you know, I felt it. I knew that you were lacking in certain skills, and so guess what? 2 weeks from now, you're going to attend a training class that works on that specific skill set. And I kind of go, yeah, I like this. You know, we're growing people. We're not just going. You're not doing your job. You're not producing what you're supposed to. I'm going to grow you, and I want to see you be successful in that. So I'm going to do all the things that I can. Or their manager or supervisor comes around a bit more often and just says, do you need any help? How are you doing? And that kind of thing. Well, if I'm a peer and I'm sitting there watching, I'm going, this is somebody that's interested in not only the company being successful, but this individual being able to be successful. They're paying attention. They're just not throwing them out there and say you sink or swim, and we're going to penalize you or be punitive about your lack of whatever success in production, that kind of thing. So, you know, just the point is that you got to eliminate negativity. You've got to eliminate a culture of gossip. You know, cliques of people that get along better with others. That's a tough one, but you got to make sure it's positive, because some people just gel, and some people have relationships outside of the business environment, and that's okay. But once again, it's got to be positive, and it can't be one against the other. It's all for one and one for all kind of environment.
Well, this has been excellent, Cornelius, and I'm so pleased that we're going to have you back as well for a couple more. Yes, for a couple more webinars actually this month, and I'm really excited about that. Definitely. So with that, you've been very thorough in giving our audience and engaging me in a really informative conversation about how to create a winning environment in the workplace. So how can someone contact you regarding your services for your company?
Our website is hr-biz-partner.com. So it's hrbizpartner.com. And if you'd like, my professional email address is CEASON, Cornelius Eason, first initial, last name, @hr-biz-partner, no S.com.
Okay, excellent. And if you would like, if you have any questions or want information about any services about the Nevada Women's Business Center, then please contact me, Kathleen Taylor, at area code 702-734-3555. And check us out online as well. If you are interested in any of our events or, a calendar of when our next educational training or webinar is, check us out online. Go to our calendar at www.nevadawbc.com. So thank you so much, Cornelius.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much for tuning in to this live stream webinar on the Nevada Women's Business Center YouTube channel. I'm Kathleen Taylor, and thanks again. Take care. Bye. Yay. Excellent.
Is that what you
Excellent.
wanted?
Yes. This
You know,
is great.
I get going, and I don't know if I was on